That's things that I'm notorious for pushing the wrong button at the right time. So we'll get through this one. I'll practice before the next one. Okay. Thank you, though. I will practice. I promise.
Do we need to do anything to start here, or what are we? Okay, we're live.
We're ready. Okay.
We're ready.
Okay, good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the April 14th special meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. At this meeting, our goal is to talk about the acceptance of what has happened with the coronavirus. The superintendent and his team is going to report to us on that. Before I turn it over to the superintendent, I want to take just a minute to thank everyone that has been working with JCPS for providing NTI and for the thoughtful things that have been posted on social media where we are guiding and inspiring and making student education a priority. So I wanted to thank everyone on the team, JCPS, the community members, and everyone else for that. And also, before we went forward, I wanted to take a moment just to express some sincere condolences to so many people because of what we're going through right now. So it would be, I'm happy for what we're doing in JCPS, but I do not want to omit the fact that there is a lot of sadness and loss in the country. So moving on, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Polio. Again, I'll go over that we are talking about an acceptance of update on the district response to COVID-19 pandemic and recommendation for approval of a revised 2019-20 school calendar and certified evaluation plan. And to my colleagues on the board, I cannot see everybody, so if you want to speak, just speak up, and then we will acknowledge you that way. So thank you, Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Chair Porter and board members. It's an honor to be back with you again. I hope everyone is healthy and working with their children on NTI. I know we have a lot of kids, board member children, as I am as well. I don't want to take everyone's presentation, but I did want to offer some thoughts before we begin. As we know, we're going to give you an overview of the incredible work that has taken place since we were last together virtually, and what this team has done. And I can't say enough about this team. Just to give you a little bit of, we are doing the special meeting tonight because we wanted to make sure that we took this time to provide you with an update on our response to COVID-19, and also especially NTI and the work that's been done in each of the divisions around NTI. Next week, we will have our regularly scheduled board meeting on April 21st, and we wanted to dedicate that meeting, cover all coronavirus things tonight, and make a recommendation to you about the school calendar and the certified evaluation plan. And then next week will be dedicated exclusively to all the things that we're working on, which as I call future state, to update you on those things, have a consent agenda. And so really next week is looking more long-term at some of the other things that obviously we are working on that was central to all of us prior to this coronavirus crisis. So if we had said 6 weeks ago that I thought that we would have every student in this district, over 98,000 students and 155 schools doing NTI, I would have probably laughed at that scenario, because as we know, when we first canceled school, I was very much opposed to the thought of having all of our students long-term in NTI, non-traditional instruction. And as I've said before multiple times, NTI was never passed into legislation specifically for large districts and really for long-term instruction. But we know this is what we are faced with now. We are in the midst of second week of implementing NTI, and we know that we will be doing this at least through May 4th at a minimum. I've also said multiple times, I think it will extend well beyond that, if not for the remainder of the school year. But at this time, it will be at least through Friday, May 1st, with our first possible date coming back May 4th. I did want to give some context around that on the calendar to make sure that we are clear. I'm asked often that I should go ahead and cancel, or our board should go ahead and cancel school for the remainder of the year. And I want to reiterate the point that I don't have that authority, and neither does our board have that authority. We have been given a certain amount of NTI days that are extended through legislation and through Commissioner Brown. And so at this point, we've been directed to work up to 6 weeks of NTI, which we are planning to do, and then take further instructions from there. Each day of NTI counts as an instructional day to our total of 1,062 hours. We cannot go below 1,062 hours without either KDE or the legislature or an executive order from the governor changing that. And so we must, the only thing we can do is take it down to 1,062 hours, which we will be asking you today to do. And I'll have Jimmy Adams explain a little bit more about that as we come closer to it. But I did also want to talk about the process. So many districts throughout this nation, I've been in contact with a lot of superintendents. When school was canceled on that last Friday in which we had school, that last day, a lot of districts went right into NTI the following Monday and pretty much said for students to go home, log on to computers, interact with their teachers on Google Classroom, and continue on with school the way it was. We chose not to do that. We chose instead to take 2 weeks where we canceled school on those 9 days that we talked about leading up to spring break, and then continuing on having our spring break. So we had 3 weeks to plan. As we look back, I think that was the most beneficial decision that we could have possibly made to prepare for this. And the work that happened in those 3 weeks was monumental. And I can't thank everyone, my team enough, assistant superintendents, principals, teachers, for the work that was done in that 3-week period. And you'll hear about that tonight, which entails building a platform for all 155 schools to put their plans together, for teachers to begin to make those plans, for us to be able to put together a plan where we could ship out 20,000 Chromebooks. And I can't say enough how challenging it's been to do this work when we have to limit, obviously, interaction between people. We can't come together as groups. We must continue to social distance, and having the vast majority of our workers work from home. But taking 20,000 Chromebooks from schools, making sure that they were disinfected properly, that they're mailed out to families, putting together a plan where we get out hotspots to our special education students, put packets of work together for students to pick up at our feeding sites, continue that and build that into the future. And then also we have now, I believe, served over 400,000 meals in the past 4 weeks. And so the amount of work that has been put in place to implement this has been extremely impressive, and I can't thank everybody enough. I do believe as we move through this, we will be better as a result of this work. And we can look back and say, I think that we will now be able to provide a different type of instruction, better interventions, extended school, summer school for kids as a result of the work that we're doing with this platform. We still know we have a ways to go. We're very pleased with the numbers. If I had told you that we would be at 90% participation rate in week 1, when we first started down this pathway, I was very worried that it would be much lower than that. So I'm pleased with our schools, our families, and our students for being a part of that. We know we still have 10% that we've got to make sure that we get in touch with. We also know this is challenging for families. Many of you board members have children, and I know that can be challenging. I'm a father, so I'm doing the same thing. I'm seeing Renee. I know that she has several children that she's doing. And so all of our staff members, not all of them, but a large number of them, are working while also doing the NTI work from home. So we're proud to bring you what we've done to this point tonight, and then take any questions before we ask for your vote on changes to the calendar and the certified evaluation plan. So we will start tonight with instruction. And I'd first like to turn it over to Dr. Coleman, who's going to talk about the work that her team did to really build this instructional platform for our students. So Dr. Coleman.
All right, well, good evening, Dr. Polio and Chair Porter and board members. It's good to see you. We're going to go over just some of the highlights of the supports that we've provided during this very unique time period. First of all, I have to say, and cannot say enough, that this work has been the result of a tremendous collaborative effort between all the teams and academics, and a really key relationship with Dr. Belcher's team from Digital Innovation. I mean, it's just been unbelievable to see what has happened. So just some highlights about the instruction that we are providing right now. So you know from the start, we provided what we call choice boards. Those are boards that look like a grid. They have 12 squares on them, and in each square there's a different activity, which very often leads to a backpack artifact. So I just saw a student from Wheeler Elementary on Twitter who had created a comparison of her writing to the writing of some of her favorite authors. And she had created a poster and was showing some similarities in their writing styles. It was really, really neat. So we're seeing some great work come about as a result of those. And then beginning this week, we are providing reading and math practice in paper form at each of our feeding sites for students grades K through 12. Students in high school will have math packets according to course. We are also providing ACT practice for high school students. So again, you know, we certainly didn't want to ask our schools and our teachers to try to prepare work and get it to students and distribute, you know, and pass papers back and forth. That's just not something we can do in this context. So we've provided that work. They'll get their packets, and there will be about 2 weeks worth of work inside. And what we're asking is that teachers make a special point each week of calling students who are working on paper, who are not connected digitally, and to talk to them about their work and make sure, you know, make sure they're getting the help they need if they need it. We also created a video today that everybody can watch that will be using any of our materials, but it specifically talks about the paper options and what they'll have. Of course, many of you, I hope, have seen our NTI portal. If not, that's something you'll want to, I think it would be fun for you to take some time to explore. Some of you with children at home have probably explored it much more than you ever care to, but our goal with this was a one-stop shopping place for parents, for students, and for teachers. Our schools are also connected to this portal, as are the teachers, you know, in each school. So that was our goal with that, and that's been really successful. We also have a digital learning channel that Dr. Belcher's team created early on when he arrived on the scene. This is something that he and Heather Worrell created, and then throughout this NTI period, we are running 30-minute sessions every day from 9 to 3 live about topics that are certainly of interest and timely to help our teachers learn more about how to function in this digital environment. So those have been really, really well attended. We had as of Friday last week, I think we had over 78,000 views in the last 4 weeks. So it is very well attended. I'm doing a session this week with a couple principals and a counselor and a teacher, representing elementary, middle, and high, talking about how they're doing defenses. So that's been a whole lot of fun, and we're having a real good audience each day. You can also find on our NTI portal the schedule of live trainings, and you can tune into those as well. We're seeing people from all over the state tune in, so that's kind of neat to see. And finally, probably what has been honestly the greatest challenge, and if you read any education, and I know you do, publications, schools are at all levels, universities across the country and across the world are struggling with grading. And we certainly do not want to do anything but be a support for our students. We feel that to grade as we typically might is really grading what's happening to them currently, and we're just not going to do that. So the key is flexibility. We are going to use for elementary and middle a MET or not yet system. For high school, as long as they are participating, will have a chance to improve their grade, whatever their grade was on March 13th. This is a great opportunity to raise that. If they cannot participate, we do not want them to be penalized either. We will, most likely they will get an incomplete. And then once we are connected again with that student, we will certainly provide them the support they need to catch up. So that has been a real challenge. Also, just in terms of supporting our students, as you know so well, we have students, a very diverse population of students, which we love, and we really had to think hard about how to provide really good support. Our ESL department has been just amazing. They have, our Levon and his translation team, they have worked around the clock to translate choice boards. And they've created, our whole ESL team has worked together to create videos and help our families know about tools and resources that are out there that are available for them. And we're working on that every day, trying to get better and better at providing the supports they need. In early childhood, I don't know if you've seen any of the tweets, but this was a great idea on the part of our early childhood director and Dr. Averett. They ordered backpacks that were shipped to each of our early childhood students' homes. And so that's an actual picture of one of our backpacks right there. And those backpacks were full of books and supplies. There's a calendar in there with activities. So it's really, really neat. And the kids in the pictures are so cute. They look like they love them. So that was a great idea on their part. And then I'll turn it over to Kim Chevalier to talk a little bit about special education and how we're meeting those needs.
Good evening, Chair Porter, Dr. Polio, and board members. Our goal for meeting the needs of students with special education is to provide equally effective alternative access for students with disabilities in instruction during this NTI time. And we have worked very closely with all other departments and have the number one is obviously what Dr. Polio and Dr. Belcher have continued to do and are continuing to doing is ensuring connectivity to all of our students with special needs. Last week, we delivered essential assistive technology to students with our visual impairments that had to have their equipment in order to learn. We also provide live support from 8 to 4 p.m. every day. We have every 2 hours or in 2-hour time slots, we have a ECE specialist and a psychologist available live for just dial in for all staff in order to ask live questions, especially when they're working with their families or working with their students. They can click on a button and ask a question and get live support. We are included in the resources because special education is not on its own. It's embedded into students with regular education. So embedded into the resources is an ECE link. Within that link, there are supports for core content. There are supports for all related services, teletherapy, how to access digital accommodations, and social, emotional, and behavior resources. We also have choice boards, as Dr. Coleman had spoke about. We have alternative assessment choice boards specifically to meet the needs of those students. We are part of the live trainings that Dr. Coleman spoke about. So every day at 11 o'clock, ECE provides specific live trainings to our staff. And also, in addition, we have a ECE compliance guidance document that is updated daily during those live conversations that teachers have. We are taking data and documenting all the questions, and then later that evening, or at least within 24 hours, we're answering those questions and providing it on a live documentation for compliance. That compliance is explicit directions based on KDE's guidance on how to implement compliance during the NTI. And then also in the parent portal, we have provided IDEA resources, basically what KDE and federal regulations have put out for NTI and special education, and the parent procedural safeguards they can also access there. So, and finally, we have partnered with Kentucky Avery and our co-op, our JCPS co-op, to create a video for the state on how to virtually conduct ARC meetings. So I'm very excited about that video that has come out, and it supports, teachers can watch it and learn how to conduct ARC meetings virtually. And the paperwork, the one barrier that we're still looking at is safely being able to email confidential paperwork over the emails, so it's safe and not everybody has access to it. So we think we have found a solution. So we're hoping to get that up and running to all the teachers and the administrators by Friday. Cross our fingers. So if you have any questions, let me know.
All right, and I'll just wrap up the focus on instruction here, just to say that we are trying to be very conscientious about thinking about what we are learning from this experience, and what we are learning that will help us to better meet the needs of our students. So, as difficult and challenging as this has been, we are, all of us, I believe, are really having to up our game with technology, and we are learning a lot about what we can do, and we're learning a lot about what our students can do that maybe we just weren't giving them an opportunity to show us before. So I absolutely agree with Dr. Polio that we will be better after this than we were. So there is a silver lining.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And, I'll just wrap up with that. When we talk about the challenge, like Kim was talking about, we do so many things during the regular school year, like mail information out. And we kind of take that for granted a little bit. But when we move into the NTI, where we cannot gather at all, just the simple challenge of how do we mail ECE paperwork to parents without putting our employees in danger, and violating that social distancing, bringing people into work, handing papers between people. So that has been one of the big things we've had to wrestle with, is getting these things to families, whether it be Chromebooks or paperwork, or when we just talk about, we are giving paper copies to families at our feeding sites. and the challenge of, okay, how do we get that back from families now in a safe way, and then get that to the teachers and the schools as well when no one is at the school. So these are just challenges we've had to wrestle with and do things differently and be very innovative about how we attack some of these challenges to make sure that we support our students and our families. Without a doubt, still, I want to reiterate this, and we've had to answer tough questions. The health and well-being of the JCPS students, staff, and families has to be the most important thing that we do. And so we've had to say no to some things. And I think as a result of us acting quickly and making sure that we were telecommuting and the vast majority of our family, our staff were working from home, I think we've been very fortunate about the degree of impact that right now the coronavirus has had on JCPS staff and students. So we know it's probably out there and maybe not have been diagnosed, but we haven't seen that impact nearly as much as I think maybe some other districts have. So we continue to keep safety and well-being first, and then obviously instruction a close second, but without a doubt, safety and well-being first. Very proud of the work we did around technology and Chromebooks. We've said that a million times, but we just didn't feel that Chromebooks sitting in our schools collecting dust, so to speak, was something that we could have when we had kids who needed these. And this has been a game changer for many of our families, without a doubt. The fact that 20,000 kids now have a Chromebook in their hand when they didn't have them before is a game changer. And I think it speaks a lot right now to the opportunity divide of many of our kids, some that have access to technology and others that don't. So I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Belcher, who's going to talk about the efforts that we've put in around our Chromebooks and hotspots. Dr. Belcher.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Thank you, Chair Porter and board members. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to present. Dr. Polio had mentioned the Chromebook distribution, and before I speak about that, I just wanted to commend the efforts that Teaching and Learning, Dr. Coleman, and our innovation team had put together. The system for NTI is just phenomenal in that short amount of time. And so again, delivering the content is a huge part of that, but also having the hardware to access that content. So Dr. Polio had charged myself and my team with making sure our students have access to the hardware, such as the Chromebooks. And within a couple weeks' time, we've been able to actually ship approximately 20,000 Chromebooks, which is a monumental task, just to do that. So just quickly, there's so many people involved in those logistics. We had a task force of different people and different teams, from assistant soups to school level people on our team, and helping make those decisions and those logistics. And so it was such a collaborative effort from cross-departmental efforts. And so once we did that, our school, our building principals helped to put those into a central location in the schools. Once we had them in a central location, we disinfected those. We actually went through and did a quality control check. We had to package those and print labels, ship those. So I mean, it was just such a process, and our people worked nonstop for 2 weeks, and they're still continuing to do so. So. And then once we get the devices out, obviously we've had such a spike in support. You think it's one thing to have the devices, but we have went from, a traditional way of working to now we have nearly 17,000 staff members just telecommuting. So that support alone is challenging, and so now we have support of challenging, with our families and our students and our staff. So our integration team has done such a wonderful job on creating a different type of support system, from chat, online virtual chat, to virtual hangouts with our staff and with families to be able to provide support and even from instructional or integration support with the devices to hardware and configuration. So that has been something that's been a bit of a challenge, and our team has really rose to the occasion. So we talk about also one last thing is the internet access. So we have hotspots that are being shipped to us this week. We're collecting information for ECE students that are in need of internet access at home. So we're collecting that information. And then once we get those devices, then we'll put those in the hands of our students that do not have internet access at home. So I couldn't be more proud of our team and the JCPS family of what they've been able to do in such a short amount of time. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any questions.
And so thank you, Dr. Belcher. And I want to make sure that we understand what an equity issue that this is around this opportunity divide, and the fact that we got this technology, these Chromebooks, to some of our homeless students was, really an important part of this work. So I've asked Dr. Marshall if he could jump in and talk a little bit about the impact on our racial equity work when it comes to all of the things we've talked about.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Porter and board members. And I'm glad to see everybody on here healthy. And we understand this. It was in the racial equity policy that the board approved that tech equity is actually a racial equity issue. So prophetically, we kind of got in front of that. And under the leadership of Dr. Polio, with the help of the board, our first drive and our first incentive, our first action was to make sure we address our most marginalized students. So if you recall, Dr. Polio on all of his press conferences unapologetically said, this is going to first go to our neediest students, ELL, homeless, foster care, free and reduced lunch. So that being said, when we start talking about tech equity, and I know Chair Porter and Board Member Brady and others talk about the importance of technology for all students, we're really pushing this work forward. I can tell you, no pun intended, a lot of districts have washed their hands, pun intended, with this work. And for us to get out there and really tackle the 26th, 25th biggest district in the nation and try to get this out to our students is monumental. Just today, there was two principals, Danae Speaks and Joe Wood, spoke at the Urban League about the importance of NTI and the successes that we're having, and the fact that this is not a completely iron shirt. We know, and Dr. Polio said that it is still a wrinkly shirt, but we also know that this is something that a lot of districts have not tried and a lot of districts aren't doing. So when we start talking about tech equity, or we even start talking about post-corona, post-COVID, our leader, and I know this board is thinking about what can technology do as we leverage this work forward to be a different way in which we address things. Technology might not be, can be the conduit, but we're going to get the content right with NTI and some of the other work. So I think that is very important as we understand moving this work forward, that we have to use technology as a conduit to equity, and then work on the content that goes inside that conduit, being curriculum, being content teaching, and making sure everyone has one. 30 seconds left. I will say I trolled board member Scholl's Facebook, and he asked people what's going on. I love my son has special needs, Kim, and I love the fact that they are tailored these assignments around his IEP goals. I love seeing him smile when he completes an assignment. The teacher has called every day to check on our special needs child. Not a whole lot has changed except my students are more engaged and more excited to do work now than they were in school. Pastor's going great. Some hiccups the first day, but it's getting better and better each day. Du Bois Academy has been on it. They already had a Google Classroom routine, and they already did a lot because they already had technology. My son knows what he needs to do. My other son is a PRP, and there's hands-on learning and some very innovative stuff. So we are really, and I want to be very clear when we talk about this as we move forward. Tech equity is a racial equity issue, and that's a reason why it's the goal inside of our policy. So I'm appreciative of being a part of this work. I'm very proud of the work, and I hope that I know that we will continue to use technology as a way to balance equity, particularly racial equity.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall.
And that's it.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And now one group I've been very proud of too is our communication team, who has just worked tirelessly to get out information to families and continues to do that. So I'd like to turn it over to Renee Murphy to talk about their work. Renee, you're muted, Renee.
There we go. Rookie mistake there. Good evening, Chair Porter, Dr. Polio, and board members. Thank you for allowing me some time to share what my department has been doing during NTI and to support this district during our extended closure. So I'll talk to you first about our direct communications to families to request a Chromebook. And so we had direct emails that had specific information for each family to more than 42,000 families that we had email addresses for, families that were free and reduced lunch, ESL and ECE. We sent them direct messages about how to borrow a Chromebook during NTI. And for the families that we did not have an email address for, we sent direct text messages to them where they could call into the call center and we would sign them up to request a Chromebook. Our call center was staffed with more than 30 people. We typically have 3 to 4 people who are answering calls in our call center. And during our initial week of requests for Chromebooks, we had more than 54,000 calls that came into our call center. We also work with various community groups and organizations to have further outreach in our community. We were able to reach more of our ESL families, our homeless families, as well as our families who have foster care students who may be in need of a device. And we also worked with other community groups too, our parent advisory committee, to provide that direct communication to our parents, and to also, we work with our ESL department to translate much of our material for our ESL families. Our overall strategic plan during this time really included very clear and direct messages from the superintendent through various forms, through press conferences, through video messages, through social media posts, and continuing his weekly wrap-up, his weekly message. And leading up to NTI, we had a big plan that was laid out day by day that detailed media interviews just about daily with the superintendent and other leaders from the district during this time. We scheduled multiple parent messages per week. In addition to our employee communication that we do weekly, we did that multiple times a week, the hub. We revamped all of that to provide support to our employees and to communicate to them directly about our COVID closure. We also produced frequently asked questions that we use for our employees as well as our parents. And our team worked on multiple videos leading up to NTI to really get the community involved to understand what this would look like. We developed a web page that provided more information about what this would look like, in addition to the NTI portal that was developed as well by Dr. Belcher's team. We had multiple videos that were produced behind the scenes leading up to NTI and during the first week and a half here of NTI to really show what's going on behind the scenes, to highlight our employees and to really show the support they're providing to our kids even during our closure. Our marketing coordinator developed a plan to make sure our outreach about NTI would go onto the social media feeds of our parents. So we're able to do some really clear messaging that we knew would reach our parents who had students in JCPS. And we have positive stories in the media almost daily about our closure. We still have some today even, so it's been great to see. And one fact I'm really proud of, I'll end on this note for you. Since March 12th, which was the day before we closed, that Thursday before, since March 12th, we have had 665,000 video views on all of our social media platforms on material about the closure, about NTI, all produced by our department. And Dr. Polio's press conferences alone have had more than 180,000 views on all 3 of our social media platforms. So I'm really proud of my team. They have been working nonstop to provide information and support to the community. So I'm proud of them. I'm proud that we've been able to reach so many families. And we are getting the message out there, and I hope our families have been receiving it. So if you have any questions, I can take those at this time.
We'll do the questions at the end, Renee, but all at one time. So thank you very much for that. Very proud of your team and what they're doing. As you know, one that's been talked about a great deal are the amount of meals that we are providing. I think it speaks to the amount of need in our community right now. And I'm proud of this, but I also wonder where our kids would be right now without these meals that we're providing for our students. So Dr. Beatty, could you update the board, please, on meals distribution and nutrition? And I do want to say thank you so much to those workers who are showing up every day to support our kids by giving them meals. I don't know where we would be without you. So thank you for that. But Dr. Beatty?
Sure. Dr. Polio, Chair Porter, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on some work from the operations division with regard to various functions that we have put in place in order to support the community and our cross division colleagues with regard to COVID-19. Since March 16th, the School Community Nutrition Services has distributed over 400,000 meals. That averages about 42,000 breakfasts per day, about 65,000 lunches per day. And that volume only represents about 20% of what we would normally distribute on a normal school day. So while we are distributing a lot of meals, it's still, it's about 20% of what we would normally distribute. We are now distributing meals 3 days a week. We distribute 2 on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, and 1 on Friday. And the reason for that is to reduce the amount of contact between families and our workers. And it also gives our production sites the opportunity to prepare meals, to stage them and have them ready. We have 68 sites currently. There are 44 schools, the Americana area. We have 13 mobile sites at various apartment complexes and community centers around the city for us to distribute meals. And as a result of some guidance from the Kentucky Department of Education and the federal government, we are able to distribute up to 3 sets of meals for children not present. So if a mother and a child come up to a site and there are 2 other or 3 other children at home who aren't in the vehicle with them, we are able to distribute those meals to ensure that the families receive them. And as Dr. Polio mentioned, the JCPS staff members who are showing up at these work locations, the JCPS employees who are at the production center creating meals every day, equals about 175 workers who are processing, assembling, and distributing meals. And finally, while the School Community Nutrition Services team is receiving a lot of attention regarding their work, in the operations division, there are every other division is working very hard to support the various efforts to provide support to families with regard to coronavirus. Our warehouse was very instrumental with the packaging and shipping of Chromebooks. Security teams are still continuing to work and to provide coverage and security services to our buildings. Maintenance and grounds and facilities teams are still on call and still going out to work to do some grass cutting, to be able to make sure our boilers and chillers are maintained. Our facilities group continues to support renovations where we can do those things with independent contractors. Our plant operators are showing up twice a day to do building checks to make sure that our facilities are secure and that they're monitored and needs are being met. And also our transportation team is still continuing to work on some training modules and to get ready for the 2020-21 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Beatty. Our last couple presenters really gets a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of things. Dr. Dossett's going to talk about some of the documentation, some of the things that KDE requires for us in regards to student participation, teacher participation, and evidence of learning. And then we'll finish up with Jimmy, who will talk about the things you will be, the recommendations to you tonight. So Dr. Dossett.
Good evening, Dr. Polio and board members. I get to cover the most exciting part of tonight's presentation, I think, which is KDE documentation. So we are required to submit 3 pieces of evidence to KDE at the end of the NTI period. One has to do with evidence of learning. And so I've been working with the assistant superintendents on this piece where we are collecting examples of lesson plans and student work each day. So by the end of the NTI period, we'll have 30 or more different examples of student work and lesson plans that cover all grade levels and content areas. The second required documentation has to do with student participation. And here we are using the KDE solution, which is a Infinite Campus module that was developed just for COVID-19. We're following the KDE guidance and considering participation broadly. So as any type of contact that staff would provide to support students. And as Dr. Polio mentioned, through the first week, we're seeing about 90% participation rate, which is amazing for that first week. We had 73 schools that were above 90%, and we anticipate that that could go a little bit higher as teachers finish entering in that participation for the first week. And then lastly, we're required to report on teacher participation, and we're using regular time and attendance records from payroll in order to complete that last piece of the documentation.
Thank you, Dr. Dossett. And then finally, we'll look at revising our 1920 calendar and then also our evaluation plan, as we must change that because the observations and the deadlines are really all past us now. And so we're making some changes to the evaluation. I do want to say on the calendar, Jimmy Adams will be going through the changes that we are recommending to you at this time. Clearly, we know there could be further changes. I mean, we can only anticipate what we have now, which is working on those 1,062 hours. We do believe that the governor will give us further guidance at some point next week based on a call with KDE superintendents today. So we do think we'll get further guidance next week as to where we will be after May 1st. But we want to make our changes to the calendar based upon the fact of what would it take to get us to 1,062 days. On a side note, we will also ask you for next year's calendar at our next meeting for the 2020-2021 calendar. As we know, Oaks Day will now be September 4th. So we will do that at our next meeting, as we want everything on this meeting to be focused on COVID-19 response. So I will turn it over to Jimmy Adams.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. And as Dr. Polio said, these are the 2 items that you'll be taking action on tonight after the conclusion of this proposal and presentation. So as you're aware, we have missed 10 instructional days due to COVID-19. Those days are March 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and then the 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th. Then we also altered April 6th, and we used that as an in-service day to help prepare for the non-traditional instruction days. The calendar committee met on April 6th, and they developed this proposal for you. And that is to make up 6 instructional days by changing May 1st, which was formerly Oaks Day, May 19th, which was originally the primary election day, May 29th, June 1st, June 2nd, and June 3rd, 2 instructional days. Their proposal also is to remove 4 instructional days from the calendar, which would get us to the full 10 instructional days missed. Statute does require that districts have a minimum of 171 instructional days and 1,062 instructional hours. Within our calendar, we can remove those 4 instructional days and meet both of those requirements. The committee is also recommending using 4 emergency COVID-19 days for staff where applicable, so that everyone is able to be paid their full contract as agreed to. So that's the calendar proposal that will be before you. And then I wanted to move on to our revised certified evaluation plan. Senate Bill 177 actually allows districts to have board-approved revisions to the certified evaluation plan without requiring approval from KDE due to COVID-19. We worked with the Educator Quality Oversight Committee, which is made up of teachers and administrators, and also JCTA leadership to come up with this proposal. And what we are looking at for tonight to ask action on is the certified non-administrative summative evaluations. We are recommending that the 2019-2020 summative evaluations be extended into the next academic year. All observations that have been conducted this academic year would be used toward the respective summative evaluations next year, meaning that if they've already conducted one, they would not have to conduct all of them again next year. They could use the ones that they had this year. Also, all certified non-administrative summative evaluations, we're recommending that they all be moved up 1 year from their current year, which means that those that are due this spring in 2020 would actually become due in spring of 2021. Those that are currently due in spring 2021 would be moved to spring of 2022, and those due in the spring of 2022 would be moved to the spring of 2023. There are some exceptions that we have with this. If an employee had all observations completed by March 13th, 2020, then the summative evaluation may continue to move forward this year. That summative evaluation could be conducted virtually if both the employee and the evaluator agree to that. If not, then they would wait for that summative evaluation until we get back to normal operations. The other exceptions involve employees that are probably going to be non-renewed employees. If all of those observations have been completed, then that summative evaluation can move forward, and also for disciplinary non-renewals. The summative evaluations would be, as I say, be conducted virtually through video conferencing, especially they would have to be conducted for the non-renewals that I just mentioned. Then we also have some employees who are currently on intensive support, and what we are recommending for that, or what we'd like to do for that, is actually just freeze the timelines on that. On March 13th was the last day, and then have those timelines resume back when we get to normal operations. Aside from the certified personnel evaluation plan, we do plan something very similar with the classified non-administrative personnel by extending those summative evaluations due this spring into the next academic year, moving all the others forward, as I mentioned earlier. We have talked with our unions about that, and they're very comfortable with that. And then we do have some classified employees that are in their probationary hiring period, and we've talked to our representative unions on those, that those probationary periods will be frozen starting March 13th, 2020. They would continue working as we are now, but the probationary period would resume once we get back to normal operating procedures. I do plan to come back to you next week with a very similar proposal around certified administrators, but we just weren't really ready for that tonight. So that really kind of concludes the presentations for this information. Again, we are asking you to take action on the revised calendar and revised certified evaluation plan.
Thank you, Jimmy. We appreciate that. And so I will wrap up just by saying thanks to everyone on my team that presented tonight. I think the biggest challenge we had amongst all of these challenges was making them work from home and kicking them out of here. None of them seemed to really like to do that. So getting them out the door was important for us because we wanted to follow that social distancing. And also thank our administrators, our school staff, our teachers for their hard work. We continue to work on how we do this. This is not, we're not saying that we can't improve. We have a lot of improvement to make, especially around the guiding principles that we challenged our schools with, which was student support, number one, flexibility, number two, and really over communicating, if we can even do that, is number three. And so we'll continue to improve on those and push for that as long as this may take. We know we're going to have to continue to monitor and see even into the summer months and see what and when and if we are able to come back together successfully and then do things like summer programs and even into the 2020-2021 school year. We're monitoring all of those things. But we will be, I believe this, as we started this presentation, using all of these things once we get through this to be a better district and support for our students as a result of our work during this coronavirus crisis. So thank you for the opportunity to provide you with all of that information. I know that was a lot. We will stop now and take any questions or comments you have before we ask you to vote on the two proposals.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a roll call to see if folks have questions. And if you have none, that's fine. You can say no questions, thank you. And I'll move to the next board member. And then we'll come back and determine how we will do the vote. So I'm going to start this time by district. So the first person is Dr. Chris. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say to Dr. Polio and his team that I think from what I've heard, you're taking the exact right approach with trying to make things as easy as possible for everybody, be it teachers, students, or parents, which is, of course, the group that I care about the most in this particular instance. So thanks for that. And just want to say thank you to all the JCPS employees that are still having to show up in person. Well, to everyone that's working, thank you, but especially to the ones that are having to show up in person to distribute meals and work and technology. Thank you so much for the job that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Craig?
Same comments as Dr. Kolb. These are awful times, but it seems like we're doing everything that we can, the best that we can. So my hat's off to you. I'm impressed with everything that I've seen, Renee. Thank you all for putting a good face on this and getting us to where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall?
I'll just concur with everything that's been said. Amazing job. When we say that we are JCPS, we really are proving it through this. So thank you all so much for all the support. Whatever we can continue to do to grow, let's continue to do it. So thank you very much. And I really do appreciate all the work you put in.
Ms. Porter, could I jump in real quick?
Yes, sir.
I think I did not add this, and this impacts all of you all as well. I just wanted to comment, and you may have heard me comment on this already, but the class of 2020, I know you all participate in commencement ceremonies, board members, and probably one of the highlights of any year are commencement ceremonies. And I know it definitely is a heartbreaker for our seniors right now that they are unable to participate in many of the senior activities that happen every single year. Some of the most memorable times for any student and really staff and principals at a school are when you get to say goodbye, that rite of passage of graduation. Our commitment is to do that. We are committed to providing commencement ceremonies whenever that may be. So if we have to postpone and scramble and hopefully get together in July, if that's when it is, for us to hold commencement ceremonies, we are committed to doing that. If that is in the fall and we invite our seniors back, and as many that can come back, we will have a commencement ceremony for our schools because I think our graduating seniors deserve to have that. So we'll keep you posted and we'll do that as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Ms. Duncan, any questions or comments?
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, very good. That's a big note of success for me. Um, I also just want to offer, my appreciation for this tremendous amount of work that was done to allow our students to have access to continued learning. And the only sometimes I want us to keep thinking: are we teaching always, or are we assigning? Because I've seen lots of examples of work from, I'm with my grandkids and I watch what they do, and I just want to be sure that we're still teaching along with assigning. Lots of assignments, lots of hours required of work every day. I see from mine, so I know that's true for everybody, and I just I want it to be clear for kids so that they can progress. And sometime I would like, I guess I just need to talk to Carmen sometime about some of the programs that are being used, because I think it's odd. You say we're not grading, but when they complete exercises and they get quizzed on those, uh, sometimes there's a minor thing like a capital letter, and the answer will be marked wrong, or there will be a 0.3 and it's not supposed to have a 0 and it's counted wrong. So it's kind of discouraging to kids when they run into that kind of confusion, because they've gotten the answers right, but it's been counted wrong. So that's a question for Carmen. Just one other question: are we thinking in terms of evaluations when teachers are moving? At the end of this year, I'm sure some teachers will not be returning to the same schools where these evaluations were begun. So are we going to be thinking about how that's going to be handled when teachers are at different schools then in the fall, and they're so far on their schedule of observations?
We will look at that, but one of the things to keep in mind, it actually allows them to have that all of next year in order to maintain those evaluations. And moving to a new building, probably be a good opportunity for them to be able to make sure they get those 2 additional observations in. So if they stay in the same building, they have one of the observations already completed this year, but didn't get the last one, they would only have to do 1 next year. But if they go to another building, they may have to start that over, but we've still got the full year to make that happen.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
And Ms. Duncan, if I could, just a couple of points I'd like to make on some of the points you brought up. First of all, on the instructional side of it, you are right. One of the lessons we learned from many districts, big and small, implementing this is the assignment of too much work. And we just heard that time and time again, and especially those middle and high school students that have multiple teachers. Yes. And so I think, that is something we continue. This is difficult to move from a paradigm of old instruction into new and to find that right amount of work for students. And it's very difficult to be flexible. When we say we want teachers instructing their kids like we are doing now, and when we have so many families that have multiple students in the household and probably only one device if they have one, and maybe the parent is also having to do their job on that same device. So that flexibility of allowing kids to do work at various times, whether that be at night, on the weekends, in the morning, that flexibility I think is so critical, and we've learned that from others. Finally, around grading, I'll say this: those teachers in schools that have a more standards-based approach to grading are going to be much more successful in this, because standards-based grading is not about a collection of points. Instead, it's about a student meeting the standard and continuing to work at it no matter how long it takes until they meet that standard. And so that's a big shift. And I've been through that shift before with schools, but it's a big shift for people when it comes to standards-based grading. And really, that's what we're looking for in this, is just did the students meet the standards of what we wanted them to do during NTI. And if they didn't, we're going to have to find other avenues for them down the road to meet those standards, because in standards-based grading, there's not nearly as many deadlines. It's just about meeting the standard. And so that's what we really want for our kids. And that's a big growth thing for any teacher and any school to really navigate through. So it's a tough change, and we'll continue to work on that.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Pastor Schul.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Porter and Dr. Polio, and to the team. You all have done a phenomenal job in leading this district to accomplish all that has been accomplished over the past several weeks. And so I want to say thank you. My daughter was a recipient of one of those cool backpacks and has been working away. And my son has, of course, been doing his work on his Chromebook. And so great things are happening. And my daughter's pre-K teachers went as far as to, prior to her receiving her backpack, to writing her special notes and cards that she received over the last 2 weeks before the backpacks came. So I want to thank you all for your incredible work. But I also want to send my thanks to all the teachers and the teachers' assistants who are so committed to students throughout JCPS.
Thank you.
Thank you. I again want to thank everyone for the hard work. It has been, I won't say it's been a challenge, but it has been a challenge, and we have met the challenge. And I think that it's extremely important that we be proud of what we've done, knowing that after we take a deep breath, when this is over, that we will look at how we can increase and improve things. For example, I heard Dr. Beatty say that we are distributing 20% of students' food for 20% of the students that are on free and reduced lunch. So, and maybe the other students do not particularly need that, but I think that's a question we would answer later, not now. So I'm most thankful to the sites, to the people that are distributing the food. I saw a wonderful YouTube video of the students from Breckenridge Franklin receiving the equipment that they needed to work with our visual students, and a special thank you to those that distributed that. Parents are in the video talking about how it is helpful for their child to have that at home during this time. So I know that sometimes we have to go above and beyond, and thank you to ECE, the team that made sure that got out to our students. So thank you for that. There is one question that was raised about for the grades on March the 13th, that students may have an opportunity to improve those grades, or if there's an incomplete grade. The only question I would have about that is what happens to our seniors at that point if they have a grade. Is there, and I don't want an answer right now, but what will the process be for a student that may need to improve a grade, because we know we will not have them back this year. And the last thing I'm going to say, Dr. Polio, you won't like, but here it goes. I think we don't normally buy food, but when we come back together, we have got to figure out how to celebrate our schools and our staffs. Every day, people are delivering to the hospitals. They're standing in the street, clapping their hands. We have got to, I know it may be against the rules. I'm willing to put up my 50 cents, but we have got to. We must celebrate the hard work of everybody. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I'm fine with it. It's Cordelia is the one that would be the person.
I know. I've been there, done that. I know the rules, but we've never had this before, and everybody deserves to be celebrated, and to not do so. I don't know how we'll do it, but guess what? We didn't know how we were going to do this, and we figured it out. So I am hopeful that we will come up with a process. Doesn't have to be all at the same day, but we've got to make something happen to really highlight all the work that has been done by everybody, because it is phenomenal work, and people are struggling all over the country to provide instruction to schools. So that's all I have to say. I just, again, thank you for everyone that has been working and continue to work every day. So we heard the report. I'm sorry, Mr. Brady, did I skip you?
Southeast Jefferson County would like to say a couple of things.
Oh, I am so sorry. Please forgive me, Mr. Brady.
So I do have a couple of comments and some questions. First of all, thank you, and I'll just add my voice to the choir here to the phenomenal work that this district has done. We have fundamentally changed our business model in a matter of weeks. I've worked for corporations that have spent full years trying to do half as much as what we've tried to do and still haven't done it to the fidelity that we've done it. So that's a really big accomplishment, not just to Dr. Polio, but to the entire team, from the superintendent all the way down. This is what this district has done is truly, truly phenomenal. I do have a couple of questions regarding, we'll start with facilities. Dr. Beatty, our primary, the Kentucky State primary, has moved to June 23rd. A lot of polling locations are in our schools. Do we have a plan for how we're going to deal with that, considering normally this is during the school year, but now this will be beyond the school year since our primary will be on June 23rd?
Well, in most cases, when our plant operators were involved in that, and so that's something that we are beginning to take a look at this point to see what that will look like, and that'll be what's one of our things that's on the horizon at this point, is to look at the processes for primary election.
Okay, because I'm thinking we may want to try and look at maybe our facilities in a different way and providing bigger rooms for these elections to take place, so we can encourage social distancing, especially if flux, and especially if the long lines of things that we've seen in Wisconsin, if this is still an issue, which it probably will be in June. I just want to make sure that we're providing facilities and doing everything we can do to make sure that voting is safe in Kentucky. Regarding some of the NTI stuff that we've been discussing, just a couple of points. Dr. Polio put out an email to the board members regarding kind of explaining NTI and the grading process. I've had some communications with some parents expressing confusion about that, and I know we've been discussing it here, but it might be very helpful to be able to, if we can bring out some type of concise way, maybe an infographic or something to explain our NTI grading and maybe just NTI in general to our parents, and something that might make it, break it down, because they're being flooded with information right now. I think a lot of parents, and myself included, are very overwhelmed with what we're trying to do, not just with doing our full-time job, but also trying to be, being a teacher for our students as well, and our children. And to that end, I also say that there's some confusion from our students as well, and especially mine in particular, of where to go to be able to do certain assignments. There isn't always a one-stop shop, if you will, for them to get resources. I know the idea is to go through the portal or to go through Google Docs, but sometimes there's some confusion about that. And Dr. Polio also mentioned the fact that sometimes you'll have, even though we're trying to do NTI where it's not, I think, as a appointment based, like school is, you have to be there at a certain time in a certain place. I think we're trying to break out of that, because we recognize that there are students who are sharing devices in their families. And I've had times where I've had one of my son's teachers say, okay, we're going to have class at this time. We want everyone to check in at this Google Hangout or this Google Class at this time. But at the same time, my other son also has an appointment at that exact same time. And it's really hard if there's limited devices for that to happen. In my case, one of the devices went down and suddenly there was mass confusion and pandemonium that broke out in our house. So just something that, again, to throw out there. Lastly, talking about internet service, Dr. Marshall is right. It is an equity issue, but we also need to probably take a look at this from a different point of view as well, because there are areas in our district that don't have adequate internet service, either by cable, by telephone, and by cellular. We have some areas of Jefferson County that their best way of connected to the internet is, by a 56K modem, when you had to call the internet. So it's something that we may want to think about if there is any way. I don't know if Dr. Belcher, I've communicated this issue to Dr. Belcher, but if we might be able to communicate to some of the telecom companies out there to get an idea of what areas of Jefferson County have adequate coverage or don't, and then maybe take a look at where our students there or what students we have in those areas to be able to provide some type of adequate means for internet access, whether that's a hotspot or if there's some other means of maybe partnering with some other provider or upgrading their infrastructure to be able to get adequate service out to those families. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Brady, very much. Again, I said that after we survive this step, then we take a deep breath and we start trying to put the questions on the table. Example, the last question that you gave about the internet service. As we talk about equity, inequities, this is a crisis within a crisis when we are not able to provide the same to our students. It's not a JCPS issue by ourselves, though, so we will have to work with others to help us get it resolved. So we know that the issue is there. I had hoped that we would be out at 8 o'clock. We're running over a little bit, but we're going to get finished real soon. So the question is, I'll go through the roll call again. Do you want one vote or do you want to vote separately about the calendar and the evaluation process? One vote or two? Mr. Brady, what's your answer?
One vote.
Okay. Pastor Shule?
One vote.
Okay. Ms. Duncan?
One vote.
Thank you. Mr. Marshall?
One vote.
Mr. Craig?
One.
Dr. Chris?
One, please.
Okay, and I say one vote. So having heard that, at this time, is there a motion to receive the update on district responses to COVID-19 pandemic and approve the revised 2019-20 school calendar and the revised certified evaluation plan? Is there a motion? You will please say your name first in case I can't see you on the screen.
So moved by Chris Brady.
Seconded by?
James Craig.
Thank you very much. And now I will do the roll call for the vote, please. And I will start with Dr. Chris.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marshall.
Yes.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Pastor Shule.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brady.
Yes.
Diane Porter, yes. It is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, for that. I did hope you were listening, that you heard Dr. Polio say we're having such a good job with this. We're going to do it again next week. Hopefully I can find that little button that Dr. Coleman told me about so I can see everybody at one time, but we'll see how that goes. So before we adjourn, last time I did make a statement from Helen Keller, and I think we need to keep saying that this is a challenge for us. The district has met the challenge, but what we know for sure is that alone we get very little done, but together we can do much. JCPS is symbolizing and doing that every day. So at this time, at 8:19 p.m., is there a motion for adjournment? And please say your name first.
James Craig moves.
Seconded by?
Joe Marshall.
Joe Marshall?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hate to do this to you all, but I have to call the roll again. All those that, Mr. Brady, yes for or no for adjournment?
Yes.
Pastor Shule?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Chris?
Yes.
Diane Porter, yes. It's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned at 8:20 p.m. and have a good week. Be safe and be healthy, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you very
All
much.
right. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Stay safe.